into
Let's
the
do it.
news today. The first story is could be really shocking, right? That you actually have the U.S. Sanctioning a prosecutor from the International Criminal Court for essentially trying to investigate U.S. war crimes in Afghanistan. Now, one part of this is the U.S. is actually a signatory to the ICC, so there's a little bit of a difference there, but. Man, well, it seems pretty incriminating to forbid the prosecutor from looking into what she'd been doing. I would assume that like if there was like a local sheriff or a mayor who shut down an investigation into their corruption, everybody would just assume the corruption allegations are then true. So why shouldn't we assume that the U.S. is now guilty of war crimes in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I mean, it does seem a little bit suspicious when I mean, it's actually bizarre. If you go and look at like the State Department's actual the statement they put out to announce this, they just straight up say that they are sanctioning these ICC officials, and that is the main like prosecutor in the ICC, Fatou Bensouda, and like one of her top aides. They've now added to her to like a sanctions blacklist. But they say that they sanction them for quote having directly engaged in an effort to investigate U.S. personnel, like as if that is just like on its face a criminal thing. That like how dare you even try to like they're not even trying to say there's like some kind of wrongdoing. They're just saying even the fact that they're attempting to investigate, that is what we're sanctioning them for. So they're saying that pretty brazenly, it seems. But it's not totally unexpected. I mean, we've on your previous show on Foreign Policy Focus, we talked a lot about the U.S.'s sort of war against the ICC and their attempt to sort of scuttle this investigation. They've been trying to do this for quite a while. That the probe has been kind of stop and start, but they finally, I think, got like official approval and the green light to like really pursue this. I think just earlier this year in March. That was like when the official green light was given to Bensouda. Um, but she wants to look into whether the CIA, the military, and or Afghan officials were involved in some way in war crimes and torture. And I think in terms, especially the CIA, there's like a lot of reporting that indicates they have been. That like, we know a lot about like the salt pit, they called it, their torture dungeon by the Bagram Air Base. That was specifically the CIA. But we have some indication that there is, that this stuff has happened. And so that's what she's trying to look into here. And yeah, the U.S. is just absolutely not having it. They put her on a sanctions blacklist, which ironically, she's now alongside other people that the U.S. itself accuses of war crimes. So we go around putting people on blacklists and sanctioning them for, accusing them of war crimes and terrorism and stuff. But if somebody tries to say that we do it, then we're going to put them on that list with the other, alleged war criminals and terrorists and stuff. It's just kind of amazing.
Yeah, you know, one of the I guess things that is fairly obvious is that war crimes have been committed in Afghanistan. By I guess the official measures, 140,000 or so Afghanis have died, and many of those are civilians. One thing that we talked a lot about on the show was this Operation Iron Tempest, where the U.S. specifically targeted, oftentimes I think with B-52 bombers and F-22s, basically tin shats that were used in some way in the opium processing, uh, you know, process, making opium into heroin or whatever. The Taliban or whoever in southern Afghanistan exports that opium as. And so the US started bombing. And a lot of these are just, people who make opium. They're not the Taliban or even like the local drug lord. They were just, people whose their local economy, what was grown locally was opium. And so to become a part of that economy means, somebody has to process that. So they process it, and the US ends up dropping a 500-pound bomb on their house. Again, because of like this tin shed in the backyard that's just, a little lean-to, probably cost a total of, $50, that we blew to smithereens. In one case, I think there was a guy in like his family of 7 in total ended up dying. Then, of course, there's the CIA backing of different groups in Afghanistan, including those who have committed numerous war crimes. There's plenty of examples of, that they end up going into the wrong house, but then they burn it down, or they, just raid a house, and anybody who wakes up in the middle of the night, kind of like Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, with people coming in their house with armed guns, thinks, hey, I'm being burgled, or, even worse. And so I have to fire back. And when they do, they just execute all of them. And up, just like an American cop, that's the way it goes. And Actually, the ICC is like, no, that's not the way it's supposed to work. You just don't get away with going around and murdering people. And so, these are just a couple examples. I think the U.S. drone strike pretty recently on the farmers. I think they were out picking some kind of tree nut, and there's like 30 workers, and the U.S. dropped a drone strike on them. You read stories of people in Afghanistan who say, especially men, who, if there's like five of them together and they hear a drone overhead, they all run in different directions. That way, at
Right.
least if they drop a strike, they're only going to get one of them. And just what kind of conditioning, and fear do you have to put on a population to get people to act this way? And then, of course, what does it say about the nation doing that? And so there's plenty of, reason to investigate here. And I think it's important these things have to be exposed to the American people. Kind of like the George Floyd video. I do think if Americans really are forced to look at the war crimes, then they might change their minds. I really don't think we like the idea of our cops or our soldiers going around and doing really ugly things to other people. And so, this investigation, if it helps to shed light on that, look, I don't like international law. Like that's not a great thing. And I'm sure there are ways that the ICC court process could be abused by different groups, or injustice could be done through it. However, there's so many U.S. war crimes here that this needs to be investigated. And the fact that we're blacklisting them just shows that we're guilty. We just don't want anybody to see the ugliness, because then even the American people might do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the impression I get about the U.S.'s attempt to stifle all this. And just to clarify something, people might be a little confused if they had seen previous headlines earlier this summer that that Trump had signed something that authorized some kind of penalties for the ICC. I believe the distinction here is that he simply he authorized the power to do something if they wanted to, back in June, I think, with this executive order. And then now more recently, they are actually implementing that. They're actually invoking the powers that they authorized previously. So if people may have thought hey, didn't this already happen? Weren't these ICC officials already sanctioned? And no, I think that previous order just sort of opened up the possibility for it. And now they've actually gone through with it and put him on the blacklist.
Right. And I
But
think the U.S. has been just threatening. I think Pompeo has been threatening this. And this is
yeah,
part of the case that Danny Sherzen made for calling Mike Pompeo kind of a part of a mafia mentality within the White House. And there's a lot of people around the White House now that are graduates of the West Point class of 1986. And so I think he calls them the 86 mafia, but it's kind of this thuggish, just mentality. No, you don't investigate our crimes. We're not guilty. We sanction you.
right,
Go ahead, Will.
right. Very one-sided kind of thing. Yeah, I guess the last thing I'd say is just I mean, this is not new for the U.S. We've been consistently, the U.S. has maintained this position against the ICC for quite a long time. They almost joined it, I think. They just never, the U.S. almost joined the ICC way back when it was created, but we never ended up ratifying the Rome Statute, they call it. And I think the argument has largely been in the U.S. is that it's a violation of U.S. sovereignty, that we have all the procedures in place to investigate our own war crimes, and how dare you you can't dare to investigate us. It's a violation of our sovereignty. And I think actually in that executive order that Trump signed, I believe it was in June, that authorized these powers to put these ICC officials on this blacklist. They also said any ICC official who's investigating war crimes of our allies too. And so that would be the Israelis, especially. They've also staked out the same position of this is a violation of our sovereignty. You can't possibly look into allegations of war crimes. And so it's very sort of a convenient position, I guess.
And so, just the last thing I want to clarify, because there's been a lot of headlines, in the past few months too, around the U.S. threatening to sanction the ICC over an investigation into Israeli war crimes in occupied Palestine. And I believe that's a completely separate investigation. So I'm not sure if the U.S. would sanction more members of the ICC if they try to move forward with that investigation or not. But that is another case of the U.S. essentially threatening to do the same thing, hoping to just bully the ICC into not looking into U.S. and Israeli war crimes, and which we've talked about are absolutely numerous and very, very disturbing. I think we'll actually talk about a few of them today. So, but before we get to that, let's talk about the new